let us begin our journey into the mythological universe of ancient Egypt, a world shaped not only by temples and dynasties, but by stories that gave meaning to every sunrise, every harvest, and every act of life and death. In the minds of the ancient Egyptians, the universe was not a static creation, but an ongoing drama, constantly maintained by divine balance. This first chapter will guide you through the origins of the world, as imagined by those who lived along the Nile thousands of years ago. In the beginning, before time itself had a name, there was nothing. No sky, no earth, no light, no movement. Only a vast, dark, and silent ocean called Nu or Nun. Nun was not water as we know it, but the formless chaos, the infinite potential from which all things could emerge. The Egyptians believed that before the world existed, Nun surrounded everything in every direction, timeless and endless. From this infinite sea rose the first act of creation, a primeval hill known as the Benben. Imagine, if you will, the tip of a pyramid rising from still water. This was the very first land, a mound of order emerging from the shapeless waters of disorder. It was on this sacred hill that the first god came into being. He was Atum, sometimes merged in myth with Ra, the sun god, a self-created deity who existed by his own will. Alone and powerful, Atum stood upon the Benben and began the work of creation. Atum had no consort, no parents, no help. From himself, he produced the first divine pair, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. Some myths say he sneezed and spat them out, a symbolic act reminding us that creation was both intimate and spontaneous. Shu and Tefnut represented the essential elements of breath and water, which made life possible. Together, Shu and Tefnut gave birth to Geb, the god of the earth, and Nut, the goddess of the sky. In the early moments of creation, Geb and Nut were locked in a tight embrace, earth and sky together, without space for light or growth. Ra, or Atum, saw this closeness and commanded Shu to separate them. With great effort, Shu lifted Nut high above, forming the sky, while Geb remained below as the land. This separation allowed the universe to expand, and between them, the world as we know it began to take shape. Nut, the sky, was imagined as a vast arch, her body studded with stars. Each evening, she would swallow the sun god Ra as he set in the west, and each morning, she would give birth to him anew in the east. This daily cycle was one of countless examples of how myth and nature were tightly interwoven in Egyptian thought. With the separation of sky and earth, creation was not yet complete. The gods brought forth the natural world. Plants grew upon Geb's body, rivers flowed, animals appeared. The Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, was seen as a gift from the gods, a link between life and the heavens. The Egyptians did not believe that creation was a one-time event. They understood the world as a constant struggle between order, known as Ma'at, and chaos, known as Isfet. The act of creation brought Ma'at into being, but this order needed to be preserved every single day. It was not guaranteed. Even the gods could be challenged by chaos, and so rituals, prayers, and offerings were essential to keep balance in place. At the heart of this belief was the principle that humans had a role in maintaining creation, living according to Ma'at, truth, balance, justice, meant contributing to the divine effort. Every kind deed, every honest word, every well-performed ritual helped push back the tide of Nun, the ever-encroaching waters of formlessness. This worldview gave life a powerful purpose. Every Egyptian, from farmer to pharaoh, believed that their actions helped uphold the universe. They were not passive observers of a divine plan, but active participants in the cosmic order. And in the temples, the priests did not simply worship the gods. They reenacted creation itself, day after day, through sacred ceremony. As we explore deeper into Egyptian mythology, we must remember that their gods were not distant or unreachable. They were present in nature, in the Nile's flood, in the sun's warmth, in the stars above. They lived in statues, they spoke through dreams, and they listened through incense. Creation was not only a past event, it was an eternal process, one that connected the heavens, the land, and the hearts of the people. In the next chapter, we will explore Ma'at in more depth, not only as a goddess, but as the foundation of Egyptian thought. For to understand the myths of Egypt, one must first understand the sacred principle that held their universe together. In the heart of Egyptian mythology lies a concept so essential, so all-encompassing, that it governed not only the actions of the gods, but the behavior of every human being. This concept was known as Ma'at. To the ancient Egyptians, Ma'at was not merely a philosophical idea. She was a divine force, a goddess, and the very thread that bound the universe together. Ma'at represented truth, justice, balance, and cosmic order. She was often depicted as a woman with an ostrich feather atop her head, a symbol so significant that the feather itself became the emblem used in the judgment of souls. But more than a deity, Ma'at was the structure behind creation, the invisible architecture of the world. After the emergence of the world from the waters of chaos, Ma'at was established to ensure that chaos would not return. Without Ma'at, there would be no distinction between earth and sky, no sunrise, no river to nourish the crops, no society, no law. Everything that had been created, time, space, even thought, was anchored by her presence. She was the rhythm behind the seasons, the harmony in a just ruler, the calm in a well-run household. In Egyptian thought, even the gods were bound to uphold Ma'at. The sun god Ra, as he sailed across the sky each day, did so in accordance with her law. The pharaoh, considered the living representative of the gods on earth, had one supreme duty: to maintain Ma'at. His power was not only political or military, it was cosmic. If he failed in his responsibility, if he allowed injustice or disorder to grow, then chaos, Isfet, could rise again, threatening the entire balance of the world. The duality of Ma'at and Isfet was fundamental. Isfet represented the opposite of everything Ma'at stood for: lies, disorder, violence, greed, and destruction. But the Egyptians did not see Isfet as a villain to be eradicated once and for all. Chaos was an ever-present force, always threatening to break through. Life was a constant act of maintenance, a struggle to renew Ma'at day after day. This idea shaped every aspect of Egyptian culture. In courtrooms, judges would wear a pendant shaped like the feather of Ma'at. In art, pharaohs were shown offering Ma'at, often represented by a tiny figure or feather, to the gods, signifying that they upheld divine order. In architecture, temples were built with mathematical precision to reflect symmetry and harmony, embodying Ma'at in stone. Even everyday actions were infused with this cosmic dimension. To tell the truth, to care for one's family, to honor contracts, to feed the hungry, all were considered acts that sustained Ma'at. Conversely, to lie, to cheat, or to disrupt society was to allow Isfet to gain ground. In this way, the mythological and the moral were inseparable. Ethics were not only social guidelines, they were cosmological necessities. The most vivid expression of Ma'at's role comes in the rituals surrounding death. When a person died, they did not simply pass into another realm. They faced a trial, a moment in which the true weight of their life was measured against the feather of Ma'at. This event, known as the weighing of the heart, was central to the Egyptian afterlife beliefs. In this ritual, the deceased would be led into the Hall of Two Truths, where Osiris presided as judge. There, the person's heart, believed to contain the sum of their deeds, thoughts, and character, was placed on a scale. On the opposite side of the scale was the feather of Ma'at. If the heart was lighter or equal in weight, it meant the person had lived according to Ma'at. They were declared true of voice and granted passage to the fields of reeds, a paradise where they would live eternally in peace. But if the heart was heavier, weighed down by sin, lies, or injustice, it would be devoured by a fearsome creature named Amit. Part lion, part crocodile, part hippopotamus, Amit ended the soul's existence entirely. To the Egyptians, this was worse than punishment. It was annihilation, to cease to exist in any form. To prepare for this judgment, Egyptians would recite the negative confession, or declaration of innocence, before the gods. These were 42 statements, each addressed to a specific divine judge, in which the deceased denied having committed various wrongs. These confessions covered a wide spectrum of moral and social transgressions. I have not stolen. I have not killed. I have not borne false witness. I have not caused pain. I have not polluted the water. This act was not merely symbolic. It reflected the belief that moral behavior was part of a cosmic order. Every action, every word, every intention had significance. To live by Ma'at was to live in harmony with the gods and the world itself. But Ma'at was not static. She had to be renewed constantly. The rising of the sun, the flooding of the Nile, the success of crops, all were signs that Ma'at was still intact. The daily rituals of priests, the maintenance of temples, the observance of festivals, all were acts of devotion to her. Society itself was an extension of Ma'at, and it functioned only when its people acted in accordance with her principles. Ma'at was more than law. She was the embodiment of what the Egyptians valued most: order without rigidity, truth with compassion, power with restraint. She was both a goal and a guide, an ideal to strive toward and a presence to live by. As we move forward into the myths of gods and kings, of battles and transformations, let us remember that at the center of all things stood Ma'at. Her feather, light and pure, was the measure of a life well lived. And even in the most fantastic tales of Egyptian mythology, her invisible hand shaped every outcome. As we continue our journey through the sacred myths of ancient Egypt, we now turn to one of the most powerful and enduring tales in the Egyptian imagination: the myth of Osiris, Isis, and Seth. This story, more than any other, captures the Egyptian understanding of death, rebirth, justice, and divine kingship. It is a tale not only of love and betrayal, but of cosmic balance and eternal life. Osiris, in Egyptian belief, was a benevolent and wise ruler, the first king to bring civilization to the people. He taught agriculture, laws, and religion. Under his guidance, Egypt flourished. His sister and wife, Isis, was no less remarkable, a goddess of magic, healing, and unwavering devotion. Together, they symbolized harmony and order, ruling the world with wisdom and kindness. But their peaceful reign was not to last. Osiris had a brother named Seth, a god of chaos, deserts, storms, and violence. Jealous of Osiris's popularity and power, Seth plotted to seize the throne for himself. What followed would become one of the most dramatic and symbolic events in Egyptian mythology. Seth devised a cruel plan. He constructed a magnificent wooden chest, exquisitely carved and decorated, and brought it to a royal feast. With feigned generosity, he announced that whoever could fit perfectly inside the chest could claim it as a gift. One by one, the guests tried, but none matched the chest's dimensions, except for Osiris. The moment Osiris lay down inside, Seth and his followers slammed the lid shut, nailed it closed, and poured molten lead over it to seal his fate. They threw the coffin into the Nile, and it was carried away by the current. With Osiris gone, chaos began to spread. Crops failed, order broke down, and the people despaired. Isis, grief-stricken but determined, set out on a journey to find her husband's body. Her search took her across Egypt and beyond. With her sister Nephthys and the help of animals, people, and gods, she followed the river's course until she found the chest lodged in the roots of a great tree in the land of Byblos. She brought the body of Osiris back to Egypt and hid it in the marshes of the delta. But Seth, upon discovering it, was enraged. In his fury, he tore Osiris's body into many pieces, some say 14, others say more, and scattered them throughout the land. Again, Isis did not give up. She transformed into a kite, a bird of prey, and flew across the land to recover each fragment. With careful ritual, magic spells, and the assistance of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming, she reassembled Osiris's body and performed the first mummification. From this act of love and power, something extraordinary happened. Isis briefly breathed life back into Osiris, and from their union was conceived a son, Horus. Osiris, though unable to return to the world of the living, became the lord of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, where he ruled over the dead and judged the souls of the departed. His transformation symbolized resurrection, eternal life, and the promise that death was not the end. Horus, born in secret and raised in the marshes, grew strong under the protection of his mother. As a young man, he vowed to reclaim his father's throne and challenge his uncle Seth. What followed was a series of epic contests, trials, and battles between the two gods. The gods themselves were divided. Thoth, the wise, tried to mediate. Isis, ever loyal, intervened with cunning. The struggle took many forms, at times physical, at times magical, at times political. In one version of the myth, Seth gouged out Horus's eye during combat. The eye was later healed by Thoth, and it became the famous Eye of Horus, a powerful symbol of protection, restoration, and healing that the Egyptians used in amulets and artwork for millennia. The eye was not just a physical organ, but a representation of wholeness regained. Eventually, the gods convened to judge the conflict. After much deliberation, Horus was declared the rightful heir to Osiris. Seth, though powerful, was cast down and banished to the desert, where he would forever represent the forces of disorder. Horus ascended the throne, not just as a victor, but as a symbol of divine kingship, justice, and the triumph of Ma'at over chaos. The story of Osiris, Isis, and Horus was central to Egyptian religious life. It was reenacted in temple rituals, echoed in funeral rites, and told generation after generation. The people saw in Osiris the promise that life continued after death. In Isis, they saw the ideal of love, magic, and perseverance. In Horus, they saw their own pharaoh, the living god who ruled in balance with the will of the heavens. This myth also served to explain and justify the practices surrounding death and burial. Just as Isis and Anubis embalmed Osiris, so too were the dead embalmed. Just as Osiris passed into the Duat and was judged, so too would every person face judgment. And just as Osiris lived again in the world beyond, so too could the righteous hope for eternal life. As we leave behind this tale of divine struggle and restoration, we enter deeper into the spiritual structure of the afterlife, where the soul journeys, where judgment awaits, and where the gods continue to guide the fate of mortals beyond the veil of death. In the next chapter, we will follow that journey into the Duat, the mysterious underworld, and the trials that await every soul. Beyond the world of the living, beneath the shining sands and temples of Egypt, stretched a mysterious and complex realm known as the Duat, the underworld, the land of the dead, the place where every soul traveled after death. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not an end, but a transition, a journey into a new existence that mirrored the world above, yet followed its own laws, its own dangers, and its own promises. The Duat was not a single, uniform place. It was a vast landscape filled with rivers, deserts, gates, caverns, lakes of fire, and celestial fields. It was both beautiful and terrifying, serene and perilous. It was where gods dwelled, where demons prowled, and where the truth of one's life was ultimately revealed. Unlike the concept of a heaven or hell divided by morality alone, the Duat was a terrain that all souls would pass through, but only those who upheld Ma'at, truth and harmony, would reach its final peaceful destination. This journey through the Duat began at death. The body, left behind in the world of the living, was preserved through elaborate rituals of embalming and burial. But the Ka, the vital life force, and the Ba, the soul that could move between worlds, continued forward. Together, they entered the Duat to seek judgment and a place in the eternal afterlife. The soul's journey was often described as mirroring the nightly voyage of Ra, the sun god, through the underworld. Just as Ra traveled each evening into darkness to face the serpent of chaos, Apophis, and re-emerge each morning victorious at dawn, so too would the deceased travel through shadow and trial to be reborn into eternity. This parallel was not poetic metaphor. It was divine law. The cycle of the sun reflected the cycle of the soul. Within the Duat, the soul would encounter many gates and guardians. These were not merely obstacles, but tests. Trials designed to prove the purity, courage, and truthfulness of the deceased. The names of these guardians were magical and must be known by heart. Without the right words, without the correct incantations, the soul could not pass. That is why the Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and prayers, was buried with the deceased. It was a guidebook for navigating this perilous world. Among the most feared encounters in the Duat was that with Apophis, the great serpent of darkness and chaos. Each night, Apophis tried to swallow the bark of Ra, threatening to plunge the world into endless night. In this mythic battle, the soul joined the gods in maintaining Ma'at. Even in death, the Egyptian remained an agent of cosmic balance. But the heart of the soul's journey was not through fire or monsters. It was through truth. The moment of reckoning came in the Hall of Two Truths, a celestial courtroom presided over by Osiris himself, now king of the dead, seated on his throne, flanked by 42 divine judges. It was here that the soul's fate would be decided. At the center of this hall stood a scale. On one side of the scale was the feather of Ma'at, light, pure, and unchanging. On the other side was the heart of the deceased. Unlike modern metaphors, for the Egyptians, the heart was not the seat of emotion, but of memory, conscience, and truth. It contained the record of a person's life, their words, actions, and intentions. If the heart balanced with the feather, if the person had lived in accordance with Ma'at, then the soul was declared true of voice and allowed to pass into the field of reeds, a paradise where they would live forever in joy, comfort, and renewal. There, the soul could plow fields that never withered, fish in waters that never dried, and live in the company of the righteous for all eternity. But if the heart was heavy with lies, cruelty, or injustice, the consequences were final. The scale would tip, and the heart would be devoured by Amit, the fearsome creature who waited silently at Osiris's feet. Part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, Amit was the devourer of the unworthy. The soul she consumed would cease to exist. It was not punished. It was erased. This moment, the weighing of the heart, was so central to Egyptian religion that entire lives were structured around its eventual arrival. People did not act righteously out of fear, but out of understanding that they were part of a larger divine cycle. To live according to Ma'at was to live in harmony with the cosmos. To lie, to steal, to dishonor the gods or one's community. These were acts that disturbed not only social order, but the very fabric of existence. To prepare for judgment, the deceased would recite the negative confession. Unlike prayers that ask for forgiveness, this was a declaration of innocence. I have not killed. I have not stolen. I have not spoken falsely. I have not withheld food. I have not disrespected the gods. Each statement was addressed to one of the 42 divine judges. Each was a testimony to a life lived in awareness and accountability. The presence of Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, was crucial at this moment. He recorded the outcome of the weighing, ensuring that nothing was overlooked. His impartial eye guaranteed that judgment was fair and that the results were eternal. If the heart was light, the soul stepped forward, not into uncertainty, but into reward. The field of reeds, or Aru, was the final destination, a heavenly reflection of Egypt itself, where the dead lived as they had in life, but free of pain, hunger, and death. It was not abstract or remote. It was green, fertile, and familiar. For those who reached it, time was suspended. They would be reunited with loved ones, protected by the gods, and sustained by divine bounty. In this way, the journey through the Duat was both a spiritual path and a moral lesson. It reminded the living that actions had consequences, that justice was divine, and that the soul was eternal only if it aligned itself with truth. The Duat was not a place to be feared. It was a mirror, a test, and ultimately, a gateway. In the next chapter, we will enter more deeply into the myths surrounding Ra and his nightly voyage. the eternal battle between light and darkness, and how each sunrise was not a certainty, but a victory renewed. Through these stories, we see how the Egyptians wove the rhythm of nature into the fabric of the divine. Each day, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, a familiar and comforting rhythm known to people across the world. But for the ancient Egyptians, this daily event was far more than a natural occurrence. It was a sacred journey, a cosmic battle, and a renewal of the universe itself. At the heart of this cycle was Ra, the great sun god, who traveled across the sky by day and through the Duat, the underworld, by night. Ra, in Egyptian belief, was the eye of the cosmos, the source of life, and the embodiment of divine order. His presence in the sky sustained the world, warmed the crops, lit the temples, and guided the hearts of the faithful. Yet Ra's power was not effortless. Each night, when the sun appeared to set, Ra was not resting. He was descending into the depths of the underworld to confront the forces of chaos, protect Ma'at, and prepare for the dawn. The sun's journey was imagined as a voyage in a celestial boat, the solar bark. During the day, Ra sailed across the sky in the Manjet boat, watching over the world, accompanied by gods and divine beings. But when twilight came, Ra stepped into a second vessel, the Mesektet, and began his passage through the hidden realms of the Duat. This was a journey fraught with danger, transformation, and meaning. The Duat was not a simple pathway. It was divided into 12 regions, or hours, each representing a stage in the night and a unique realm of spiritual trial. In these regions, Ra would encounter gods, demons, spirits of the dead, and symbols of cosmic truths. He would face caverns of fire, rivers of darkness, and guardians of great power. He was not alone. With him traveled an entourage of protective deities, including Ma'at, the goddess of order, and Sia, the embodiment of divine perception. The greatest threat during this journey was Apophis, also known as Apep, a massive serpent of chaos who sought to destroy Ra and halt the sunrise forever. Apophis did not attack with fangs or fire alone. He struck with silence, confusion, and unmaking. Each night, he tried to block Ra's boat, to swallow the light, to break the cycle of rebirth. And each night, Ra and his allies fought back, wielding spells, chants, and celestial weapons. Sometimes, it was the god Set, the very one who once killed Osiris, who protected the boat, standing at the prow and defending it from Apophis. This role was complex and symbolic. Though Set was a god of chaos, in this context, he used his strength to defeat greater chaos. It showed that even conflicting forces had roles to play in maintaining Ma'at. As the night wore on, Ra moved through different hours, each with its own trials and revelations. In one, he passed through a field of stars, tended by ancestral spirits. In another, he encountered the corpse of Osiris, the lord of the underworld, resting in his eternal chamber. In this sacred meeting, Ra's solar essence combined with Osiris's regenerative power. Together, they represented death and rebirth, light and darkness in harmony. This moment of union between Ra and Osiris was central to Egyptian belief. It explained how the sun could die and yet be reborn. Osiris gave Ra the strength to continue, and Ra, in turn, brought light even to the world of the dead. It was not simply the passing of night, it was a metaphysical transformation, a cycle of divine regeneration that touched all levels of existence. Finally, As the 12th hour of the night approached, the Mesektet boat reached the eastern horizon. The serpent Apophis had been defeated, the darkness overcome, and Ra, now rejuvenated, prepared to rise once more into the sky. As he emerged at dawn, he was born anew, a symbol of victory, of renewal, of the enduring power of life over death. To the Egyptians, the sunrise was not automatic. It was earned. Each morning light was a sign that the gods had succeeded in protecting the world from chaos. The rituals performed at dawn, especially in major temples like those at Karnak and Heliopolis, were not just acts of devotion. They were active participation in this cosmic triumph. Priests opened the temple doors, lit sacred fires, and recited hymns that echoed the struggles of Ra during the night. For ordinary people, the rising sun was a comfort, a symbol that Ma'at still reigned, that life would continue, that the world remained in balance, and for the dead, it was a promise that even in the underworld, the light of Ra could reach them, could awaken them, could carry them toward eternity. This myth was not just about a sun god. It was about continuity, about the strength needed to face darkness, about the presence of divine order in the midst of confusion. It reminded Egyptians that no matter how long the night, dawn would come, not by chance, but because the divine struggled and prevailed. In the next chapter, we will explore more deeply the story of Isis, the powerful goddess of magic and devotion, and her role not only in resurrecting Osiris, but in shaping the divine feminine within Egyptian belief. Through her, we will see how compassion and determination became sacred forces in the myths of Egypt. Among all the deities of ancient Egypt, Isis stands as one of the most revered, beloved, and enduring figures in the entire pantheon. Worshipped not only in Egypt, but eventually across the Mediterranean world, Isis was the embodiment of magic, healing, motherhood, and unwavering devotion. Her name, whispered in prayers for thousands of years, became a symbol of protection and strength, a divine presence that transcended borders and empires. To the Egyptians, Isis was far more than just a goddess. She was a companion, a teacher, a guardian. As the sister and wife of Osiris and the mother of Horus, she played a central role in one of the most powerful myths of Egyptian religion, the story of death, resurrection, and the battle for justice. We first encounter Isis as the queen beside Osiris, ruling a peaceful and prosperous Egypt. But when her husband was betrayed and murdered by his jealous brother Seth, her role changed forever. Faced with the loss of her beloved, Isis became the seeker, the mourner, and the restorer. Her grief was deep, but her resolve was deeper. She refused to let death have the final word. Isis embarked on a long and perilous journey to recover the body of Osiris. Some versions of the myth say she wandered through swamps and deserts, disguised as a poor woman or a bird, listening for whispers, following omens. She found Osiris's body in a distant land, hidden inside a tree that had grown around his coffin, which had been used unknowingly as part of a palace pillar. Her discovery was seen not only as a triumph of love, but as a reminder that life, even when hidden or forgotten, could still be reclaimed. She returned the body to Egypt, hiding it in the marshes of the Nile Delta. But Seth, discovering this, tore the body into pieces and scattered them across the land. Undeterred, Isis began again, collecting each fragment, reassembling her husband with the help of her sister Nephthys and the god Anubis, and performing the first rites of embalming. Her love and magic were so powerful that she briefly brought Osiris back to life, and from their union was conceived Horus. In this moment, Isis became not only a wife and a widow, but a mother. She fled to the marshes to protect her newborn son from Seth, who sought to destroy him. There, hidden among the reeds, she raised Horus in secrecy. With her spells, her songs, and her courage, she shielded him from danger. Her role as mother was sacred, and it became the model of divine care. Egyptian mothers called upon Isis to protect their children, to heal their sick, and to guide them through childbirth. The figure of Isis, holding the infant Horus, became one of the most iconic images in ancient Egyptian art, a symbol so powerful that it would later echo in depictions of the Virgin Mary and the infant Jesus in Christian iconography. Her love, expressed in tenderness and sacrifice, resonated far beyond the borders of Egypt. But Isis was also a goddess of profound magical ability. Known as She Who Knows the Name, Isis was said to possess the secret names of the gods, granting her unparalleled power. In one myth, she even tricks the great sun god, Ra himself, into revealing his hidden name. She creates a magical serpent that bites Ra, causing him great pain. When none of the other gods can heal him, Isis offers the cure, but only if Ra tells her his true, secret name. Reluctantly, he agrees, and in doing so, transfers a part of his power to Isis. This story reflects not malice, but the idea that wisdom and magic, when combined with intention, can bring balance even to the highest divine order. Isis was not a goddess of brute strength or command. Her power came from knowledge, from persistence, from love, and from the mysteries of transformation. She taught that healing requires patience, that justice requires courage, and that love, when guided by wisdom, is the most powerful force of all. Temples to Isis were built across Egypt and, in later centuries, in places as far as Nubia, Greece, Rome, and Gaul. At Philae, one of the last bastions of ancient Egyptian religion, her temple stood as a beacon of faith even into the Christian era. Pilgrims came from all over to honor her, seek her guidance, and offer her prayers. Her festivals were joyous occasions. Processions of priests and priestesses carried her image along the Nile, accompanied by music, incense, and offerings. Women especially saw her as their protector. Midwives invoked her in childbirth. Healers called upon her in illness. Mariners prayed to her for safe travel, and those in mourning found comfort in her story of loss and reunion. The myth of Isis and Osiris was not just a tale to be recited. It was a spiritual framework for life and death. Osiris showed what lies beyond death. Isis showed how love can overcome it. Horus, their son, showed how the world could be made right again. Together, they formed a triad that shaped not only religious belief, but the emotional and moral worldview of an entire civilization. As we move forward, we will follow the journey of Horus, child of Isis, heir to Osiris, and champion of divine justice, as he faces the fury of Seth and seeks to restore balance to the world. Through his trials, we will see how myth shaped kingship, how the gods reflected the struggles of humanity, and how the eternal battle between order and chaos was waged not only in the heavens, but in the hearts of all who listen to these sacred stories. The story of Horus and Seth is one of the longest and most intricate narratives in all of Egyptian mythology. It is not simply a tale of vengeance or divine warfare. It is a profound reflection on justice, legitimacy, and the struggle to restore cosmic balance. After the death of Osiris, The throne of Egypt stood empty. Horus, the rightful heir, was still a child, hidden and protected by his mother, Isis. Seth, the murderer of Osiris and the god of chaos, claimed the throne for himself. As Horus grew, he was raised in secrecy in the marshlands of the Delta. There, Isis taught him everything he needed to know: the ways of the gods, the rituals of kingship, and the values of Ma'at. She healed him when he was sick, protected him from Seth's assassins, and watched over him with the same care she had shown Osiris. When Horus came of age, he emerged from hiding to challenge Seth and reclaim the throne of his father. But Seth was powerful and cunning. He had held the throne for many years, and he did not intend to surrender it easily. The gods convened in the divine court to settle the dispute. Among them were Thoth, the wise scribe, Ra, the sun god and former king, and other deities who served as judges. What followed was not a single battle, but a long and complex series of trials, contests, and legal arguments, a mythic courtroom drama that unfolded over decades. The struggles between Horus and Seth took many forms. In some stories, they transformed into animals, hippopotamuses, bulls, or falcons, and fought in the Nile or the desert. In one version, they raced in boats made of stone. Seth, attempting to cheat, built his boat from a lightweight material and painted it to resemble stone, while Horus, following the rules, truly carved his from solid rock. Despite the disadvantage, Horus won, showing that honesty and perseverance could triumph over deception. In other tales, the rivalry turned darker. One of the most famous episodes involves Seth blinding Horus by tearing out one of his eyes during a battle. This act did not merely injure Horus physically, it symbolized a temporary loss of vision, of clarity, of kingship. But the god Thoth, master of wisdom and healing, restored the eye through magical rituals. The Eye of Horus, or Wedjat, became one of the most powerful symbols in Egyptian religion, representing healing, protection, and restoration. It was used in amulets, architecture, and funerary practices for millennia. The restored eye also became an offering. In one version of the myth, Horus presents his healed eye to Osiris in the underworld, as a gesture of filial piety and divine honor. This act reconnects the living and the dead, the present and the past, reinforcing the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Meanwhile, Isis continued to support her son with wisdom and strategy. In one episode, she captures Seth in a magical trap, tying him up and threatening to kill him. But when Seth pleads for mercy, she releases him, an act that infuriates Horus. He believes that compassion toward the unjust is weakness, and in his rage, he decapitates his own mother. Thoth, ever the healer, restores her head, but the incident shows the tension between justice and mercy, a tension that still resonates in human society today. Eventually, after years of conflict, the gods deliver their verdict. Horus is declared the rightful king. Seth is not destroyed. Instead, he is given a role appropriate to his nature. He becomes the guardian of Ra's solar bark during its nightly journey through the Duat, where he battles the serpent Apophis. Even chaos, it seems, can be turned to purpose when guided by divine order. Horus ascends to the throne not as a conqueror, but as a reconciler. His rule represents the restoration of Ma'at, the harmony that had been broken by murder, deceit, and disorder. In art and ritual, every pharaoh thereafter was seen as the living Horus, the earthly manifestation of the god who had reclaimed the crown through courage, wisdom, and divine right. This myth held immense importance in Egyptian society. It established the divine legitimacy of the pharaoh, justified the laws of succession, and modeled how justice should be pursued, not through uncontrolled vengeance, but through proper process, balance, and cosmic wisdom. It reminded the people that even the gods were subject to law, to debate, and to ethical consideration. Moreover, the conflict between Horus and Seth was not just a story of gods. It mirrored the dualities of the Egyptian world. Horus, associated with the fertile Nile Valley, the order of civilization, and the light of the falcon's gaze. Seth, tied to the desert, to storms, to foreign lands and wild forces. Together, they embodied a necessary tension. The resolution of their conflict was not the annihilation of one side, but the establishment of boundaries and roles within the divine order. As we continue, we will explore the underworld in more depth, particularly the judgment of the soul before Osiris, the role of Anubis in guiding the dead, and the moral lessons embedded in the Egyptian vision of the afterlife. Through these beliefs, we will see how myth shaped not only the heavens and the earth, but the very hearts of those who lived along the Nile, carrying their hopes, fears, and ideals across the thresholds of time. In the Egyptian conception of life after death, no journey was more crucial, more sacred, or more fearsome than the one taken by the soul into the Duat, the underworld, where it would stand before Osiris and face final judgment. This passage was not just a religious idea, it was a structured, deeply meaningful spiritual framework that influenced nearly every aspect of Egyptian life, from the way people lived their daily routines to how they were buried, mourned, and remembered. The Egyptians believed that the human being was composed of several distinct parts: the physical body, the Ka, life force, the Ba, the soul or personality, the Ren, the name, and the Ib, the heart. At death, the physical body was left behind, but the Ka and Ba continued onward, seeking to reunite and become the Ak, a blessed spirit that could dwell among the gods. But before that transformation could happen, the soul had to be judged. The journey through the Duat began with a series of obstacles and guardians. The Book of the Dead, more accurately translated as the Book of Going Forth by Day, served as a guidebook for this perilous passage. It was not a single, fixed text, but a compilation of spells, hymns, and prayers personalized for the deceased. These texts provided the knowledge needed to overcome the gates of fire, avoid serpents and demons, and present the right words to the many divine gatekeepers of the underworld. At the heart of this journey stood the Hall of Two Truths. Here, the soul would appear before Osiris, the god of the afterlife, who sat upon his throne surrounded by 42 divine judges, each representing a district or principle of moral law. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification and protector of the dead, would lead the soul to the scale of judgment. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of writing and wisdom, stood nearby, ready to record the outcome. On the sacred balance, the heart of the deceased was placed on one side, and the feather of Ma'at, the embodiment of truth and divine order, on the other. This was the weighing of the heart. The heart was considered the seat of memory, conscience, and personal truth. Unlike later traditions where judgment might be based on divine grace, the Egyptians believed that a person's heart bore a true record of their life. There could be no deception here. One's deeds, good or bad, could not be hidden. If the heart was lighter than or equal in weight to the feather, it meant the person had lived in accordance with Ma'at, with honesty, justice, and respect for the gods, the community, and the natural order. The soul would then be declared Ma-Keru, or true of voice, and allowed to pass into Aru, the field of reeds, a lush, eternal paradise where the righteous lived in peace, abundance, and joy. But if the heart was heavy, bloated with lies, greed, cruelty, or betrayal, the scales would tip and the soul would be condemned. Waiting beside the scale was a fearsome creature named Amit, whose name means devourer. She was a hybrid beast, part lion, part crocodile, part hippopotamus, the three most dangerous animals known to the Egyptians. If the heart failed the test, Amit would devour it whole, and the soul would suffer the ultimate punishment: total annihilation. No afterlife, no second chance, just oblivion. To prepare for this moment, Egyptians devoted themselves to a life lived in harmony with Ma'at. They followed moral codes, participated in rituals, honored the gods, cared for their families, and spoke truthfully. At death, they would recite the negative confession, a litany of denials addressed to the 42 judges. Each statement began with, I have not stolen, I have not murdered, I have not spoken falsely, I have not polluted the river, and so on. This confession was both a moral examination and a magical protection, a spiritual declaration that the soul was worthy. The belief in the weighing of the heart deeply shaped Egyptian values. Justice, honesty, and piety were not abstract virtues. They were essential requirements for eternal life. A corrupt official, a dishonest merchant, a cruel neighbor, all risked eternal destruction, regardless of wealth or status. Conversely, a poor farmer who lived with integrity could find everlasting peace. The system was elegant in its clarity. The afterlife was earned, not given. Once judged and approved, the soul would pass through a final series of gates, guarded by gods and spirits. These thresholds often required knowledge of passwords, names, and sacred formulas. The soul, armed with the spells from the Book of the Dead, would navigate these gates and eventually arrive at the field of reeds. Aru was more than a mythic paradise. It was a mirror of Egypt at its most fertile and beautiful. Here, the fields never failed, the waters never dried, and the sky remained always clear. The blessed dead would reunite with family and friends, enjoy the company of the gods, and live in eternal contentment. They could farm if they wished, fish in calm waters, or rest beneath shady trees. They were protected, nourished, and celebrated. It was not an alien or foreign heaven. It was Egypt perfected, eternal, and harmonious. This entire process, from the journey through the Duat to the final reward, was a testament to how deeply the Egyptians believed in the moral fabric of the universe. Life was a preparation for death, and death was not a disappearance, but a transformation, one that could lead to everlasting light or to final silence. In the next chapter, we will descend again into the night, this time accompanying Ra on his nocturnal journey through the underworld. As we follow the sun's path through darkness and witness the cosmic battle against Apophis, we will understand how the daily cycle of light and shadow reflected the Egyptian belief in resistance, renewal, and the eternal triumph of order over chaos. As the sun disappeared beyond the western horizon each evening, the ancient Egyptians did not see this as the end of the day, but as the beginning of a sacred and perilous journey. the nightly voyage of Ra through the Duat. This journey, unlike the bright procession across the sky during the day, was fraught with danger, transformation, and divine struggle. It was a passage through shadow and silence, through the very heart of the underworld, where even the gods could falter, and where the future of creation hung in the balance. Ra, the great solar deity, did not vanish at sunset. Instead, he boarded a different vessel, the Mesektet bark, and began his journey through the 12 hours of night. Each hour was a separate region, filled with strange landscapes, fearsome beings, and hidden trials. In this journey, Ra took on a different form. No longer the radiant disk of daylight, he became an old man or a ram-headed god, aged, wise, and vulnerable. This transformation was symbolic. As the sun aged with the setting light, it descended into the realm of death. But this descent was not a decline. It was a necessary cycle of rebirth. For life to continue, for light to return, Ra had to travel through the depths of darkness and face the forces that threatened to unmake the world. The Duat, during Ra's journey, was not simply a place of the dead. It was a cosmic battlefield where the boundaries between order and chaos were thin and constantly shifting. In each hour, Ra encountered guardians, gates, rivers of fire, and strange inhabitants. His passage was accompanied by a divine entourage, gods like Sia, perception, Heka, magic, and Hu, divine utterance, each representing an essential power in maintaining creation. One of the most important figures on this journey was Ma'at herself, who stood at the prow of the bark. Her presence was not just ceremonial. She was the principle that allowed the journey to continue. Without Ma'at, without the balance and order she embodied, the boat would lose its course, and Ra's light would never return. But each night, there was one trial that dwarfed all others: the confrontation with Apophis, also called Apep. Apophis was the great serpent of chaos, a force of primordial darkness who sought to destroy Ra and undo creation. He did not reside in one place, nor did he die when defeated. Instead, he re-emerged night after night, a constant threat, a living embodiment of Isfet, disorder, lies, and annihilation. Apophis attacked the bark in the deepest part of night, often in the 5th or 7th hour of the journey. He rose from the shadows, his massive coils blocking the path of the sun, his open jaws threatening to consume Ra and all of existence. The gods on board fought him with spells, weapons, and chants. Set, the god of strength and storms, played a vital role here. Though elsewhere in myth Set could be an agent of chaos, during this nightly battle, he served as Ra's champion, standing at the front of the bark and striking Apophis with a great spear or club. This seeming contradiction, that the god of chaos defended order, reveals a deeper truth in Egyptian theology. Chaos could not be eradicated. It had to be confronted and contained. Even dangerous forces had a place in the balance of the cosmos when directed toward the preservation of Ma'at. Sometimes, Apophis was wounded. Sometimes he was paralyzed by magical incantations. In some stories, he was sliced into pieces, but never permanently destroyed. Each morning, he would rise again, as eternal and necessary as Ra himself. The cycle would begin anew. Victory was not final. It was renewed daily by faith, ritual, and cosmic struggle. When Ra overcame Apophis and emerged from the Duat, the eastern horizon would glow with the first light of dawn. He was reborn as the young sun, radiant and strong, beginning his daytime journey once more. This daily resurrection was not taken for granted. The Egyptians saw it as a miracle, a sacred victory that needed to be supported with prayers, offerings, and purity of life. Temples across Egypt reenacted this cycle in their rituals. At sunrise, priests would perform ceremonies to welcome Ra, to ensure that he had triumphed. Incense would be burned, hymns would be sung, and images of Apophis, often made of wax or clay, would be ritually destroyed, symbolizing the defeat of chaos and the protection of Ma'at. This myth, while grand and celestial, also resonated on a personal level. Just as Ra faced darkness each night, so did each person in life. The descent into hardship, the battle with fear, the emergence into light. These were not just divine themes, but human experiences. The myth taught that light could be reclaimed, that courage could overcome despair, and that even in the darkest hour, order could prevail. Moreover, the nightly journey of Ra echoed the journey of the soul. Just as the sun passed through the Duat, so did the deceased, guided by Ra's light, facing trials and hoping for rebirth into eternity. In this way, the sun's cycle was more than a physical event. It was a divine map, a rhythm that united gods and mortals alike. In the next chapter, we will return to the world of the living, to explore how these cosmic beliefs shaped the daily practices, temple rituals, and moral expectations of Egyptian society. Through the fusion of myth, law, and life, we will see how the Egyptians made meaning of existence and upheld the fragile harmony of the universe with every sunrise. Having followed the gods through the underworld, the battles of Ra, and the judgments of the soul, we now return to the land of the living, to ancient Egypt itself, where mythology was not confined to temples or tombs, but infused every corner of daily life. For the ancient Egyptians, myths were not abstract stories or distant legends. They were present in their homes, fields, rituals, and choices. The divine world and the human world were not separate realms. They were intertwined in every breath, every sunrise, every harvest. Egyptian society was structured around the principle of Ma'at, and myths provided the moral and cosmic justification for that order. The pharaoh, the highest authority in the land, was not just a political ruler. He was the living Horus, the son of Ra, the guardian of Ma'at. His coronation was seen as a cosmic event, the restoration of harmony on earth, mirroring the triumphs of the gods. Every law he proclaimed, every temple he built, every enemy he defeated, all were viewed through the lens of sacred duty. Temple rituals were daily reenactments of divine stories. In the inner sanctums, where the public could not go, priests performed complex ceremonies at dawn, noon, and sunset. They woke the statue of the god, offered food, anointed it with oils, and spoke sacred hymns, not because the gods needed sustenance, but because these acts upheld the balance of the world. The temple was a miniature cosmos, and the rituals within maintained the fabric of the universe. Festivals celebrated mythic events with grandeur and joy. The festival of Opet in Thebes reenacted the divine union of Amun and Mut, mirroring the fertility and rebirth of the land. The beautiful feast of the valley honored the dead and linked them to the divine cycle. In these processions, images of the gods were carried through streets and along the Nile, accompanied by music, incense, and the cheers of thousands. The myths came alive, not just as sacred memories, but as living truths. In homes, people told the stories of Isis and Horus, of Ra and Apophis, of Osiris and the underworld. These were not just entertainment, they were guidance. A mother might whisper the tale of Isis protecting Horus to comfort a sick child. A farmer might pray to Osiris for a bountiful harvest. A merchant might place an amulet of the Eye of Horus on his boat to guard against storms and thieves. Amulets were more than ornaments. They were protective symbols drawn directly from myth. The Ankh represented life. The scarab represented rebirth. The Jed pillar, associated with Osiris, symbolized stability. The Ujat, the healed eye of Horus, protected against harm and illness. These symbols were carved into tombs, painted on walls, and worn on the body, ensuring that the divine world walked alongside the mortal one. Myth also guided justice. Judges wore the feather of Ma'at on their chest or held it in their hand. Legal decisions were not merely about secular law. They were declarations of harmony or disorder, judged according to divine principles. Theft, betrayal, and falsehood were not just crimes against people. They were insults to Ma'at herself. Even in mundane routines, myth was present. The Nile's flooding was seen as the tears of Isis mourning Osiris. The rising of Sirius, marking the new year, was associated with the return of divine favor. Births were protected by Taweret and Bes, gods who never appeared in the great myths, but who were essential in household shrines. Death was not an end, but a beginning, a return to the gods, a passage into the mythic cycle of rebirth. Artists and architects encoded myths into their work. The walls of temples and tombs depicted the stories of the gods with precision and reverence. Every gesture, every posture, every color held meaning. A pharaoh smiting his enemies was not just a political image. It was a reenactment of Horus defeating Seth, of Ma'at overcoming Isfet. Columns shaped like papyrus and lotus recalled the primeval marshes of creation. Obelisks pointed to the sky, echoing the Benben stone, the first land that rose from the waters of chaos. For the ancient Egyptians, to live was to participate in myth. To farm the land was to repeat the story of Osiris, who brought agriculture and renewal. To face illness was to remember the healing power of Isis and Thoth. To journey through life was to travel, step by step, along the same path as the sun, rising, declining, disappearing, and rising again. Children learned these stories not as distant legends, but as the very structure of reality. They knew that the stars were the body of Nut, that the wind was the breath of Shu, that their names carried magic, and that their actions shaped eternity. Myth was not fantasy, it was knowledge, the oldest and most sacred knowledge they had. In the next chapter, we will explore the myths surrounding lesser-known but no less powerful deities, goddesses of war and protection, gods of wisdom and time, and see how even the most hidden corners of the Egyptian pantheon reveal a universe filled with meaning, balance, and mystery. Through these deities, the Egyptians found help in daily struggles and hope in moments of fear, reminding us that even in a world shaped by vast cosmic forces, the divine was always close. Beyond the great triads of Ra, Osiris, and Horus, and beyond the well-known goddesses like Isis and Hathor, the pantheon of ancient Egypt included a host of powerful deities, each with their own myths, domains, and roles in the daily lives of the people. These gods and goddesses, though sometimes lesser in prominence, carried immense importance. They were protectors, healers, warriors, and scribes, divine forces that embodied the nuances of the world and its eternal balance. One of the most fascinating of these was Thoth, Jehuti in Egyptian, the god of wisdom, writing, science, and the moon. Often depicted with the head of an ibis, or sometimes a baboon, Thoth was said to have invented hieroglyphs and maintained the records of the gods. He was the divine scribe, the one who recorded the outcome of the weighing of the heart, and the mediator in disputes between gods, such as the long trial between Horus and Seth. Thoth was not a warrior nor a kingmaker, but his influence was everywhere. He measured time, created the calendar, and brought balance to cosmic chaos through reason. In myths, he healed the wounded eye of Horus, restored harmony after divine conflicts, and even added days to the Egyptian year by defeating the moon god Khonsu in a game of dice. Through intellect and cleverness, he made room for creation to unfold. Egyptians saw Thoth as the embodiment of divine intelligence. Scribes prayed to him, students honored him, and magicians called upon his name in spells and rituals. To know something, truly know it, was to participate in Thoth's domain. Another powerful and mysterious figure was Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war and healing. Her duality was striking. She could bring plague and destroy armies, yet she could also cure the sick and avert disasters. Sekhmet was said to be the fiery eye of Ra, sent to punish humanity when it grew disrespectful toward the gods. In her rage, she nearly wiped out all life, until Ra, regretting his decision, tricked her by filling a lake with red-dyed beer. Believing it was blood, Sekhmet drank until she fell asleep, ending her rampage. Sekhmet's story reminded Egyptians of the thin line between justice and destruction. She symbolized the necessary use of force, the wrath that protects Ma'at. Physicians, especially those who treated epidemics, revered her, believing that to heal was to command her favor. She was fearsome, yes, but essential. On the gentler side stood Bastet, the cat-headed goddess of home, fertility, and protection. While Sekhmet represented ferocity, Bastet embodied grace and vigilance. In early periods, Bastet too was a lioness goddess of war, but over time she evolved into a domestic protector, much like the cats she resembled. She watched over mothers, guarded households, and chased away evil spirits. Cats were sacred to Bastet. In Egyptian homes, they were more than pets. They were living symbols of divine presence. To harm a cat was not only a crime, but a sacrilege. In the city of Bubastis, her major cult center, festivals for Bastet were among the most joyful in all Egypt. Music, dance, and laughter filled the streets. Worship of Bastet reminded the people that joy and safety were divine gifts. Another unique figure was Bes, a dwarf-like god with a lion's mane and a fearsome face. Unlike most Egyptian deities, who were formal and majestic, Bes was playful, wild, and protective. He guarded women in childbirth, frightened away demons, and brought happiness to families. His image was carved on bedposts, amulets, and cosmetic jars. Anywhere his fierce joy could repel misfortune. Bes had no great temples, but he was everywhere. He danced, played music, and made faces to scare off evil. He was the friend of the vulnerable, the guardian of joy, and the silent protector who stood watch through the night. His presence proved that even in a religion of kings and gods, there was room for the mischievous, the strange, and the kind. Another deity worthy of note is Neith, one of the oldest goddesses in the Egyptian pantheon. Often depicted wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt and holding a bow and arrows, Neith was a goddess of creation, war, and weaving. In some myths, she existed before all things, and it was she who wove the world into existence. In others, she settled the dispute between Horus and Seth with her wisdom. She was also the patron of soldiers and mothers, embodying both fierce protection and nurturing creation. And then there was Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming and the dead. Though Osiris ruled the underworld, Anubis guided souls to their judgment. He embalmed Osiris after his death, inventing the funerary rites. Anubis was not a judge, but a guide, the silent companion of every soul. His black fur symbolized fertility and rebirth, and his image appeared on countless tomb walls and sarcophagi. People prayed to Anubis for safe passage to the afterlife. Priests who performed embalming saw themselves as his earthly representatives. In an age of uncertainty and danger, Anubis was the promise that the journey need not be faced alone. These lesser-known deities, Thoth, Sekhmet, Bastet, Bes, Neith, Anubis, together formed the rich spiritual landscape of Egypt. They taught that the divine was not only in the sky or the sun, but in ink, in music, in childbirth, in the laughter of children and the silence of tombs. They also reminded people that no part of life was too small for divine attention. Whether a storm in the desert, a difficult labor, or a night of anxiety, the gods were present, watching, protecting, teaching, waiting to be called upon. In the next chapter, we will witness how these deities, through temples, rituals, and daily offerings, continued to live in the hearts of Egyptians long after their civilization began to change. As we approach the twilight of ancient Egypt, we will explore how the old gods adapted to new rulers, new faiths, and a changing world, leaving behind a legacy that still echoes through time. As the centuries passed and the sands of time shifted, ancient Egypt, once isolated and sovereign, became a land shaped by conquests, migrations, and new ideas. From the arrival of the Libyans and Nubians to the powerful Persian occupation, and later the Greeks and Romans, Egypt saw wave after wave of foreign rulers. And yet, through it all, its myths, gods, and sacred traditions endured, adapting, transforming, and persisting in ways both subtle and profound. By the time of the New Kingdom and into the late period, the religious system of Egypt had grown increasingly complex and syncretic. Gods began to merge, taking on shared attributes. Amun, the hidden god of Thebes, was fused with Ra to become Amun-Ra, a supreme solar deity. Thoth, long known as the god of wisdom and moonlight, was sometimes combined with Hermes in Greco-Egyptian thought, forming Hermes Trismegistus, a figure who would later influence alchemy and mystical philosophy far beyond Egypt's borders. The Greeks, especially after the conquest of Egypt by Alexander the Great in 332 BCE, brought with them their own pantheon. But rather than destroy Egypt's gods, they absorbed them. Alexander himself sought the blessing of the oracle of Amun at Siwa, aligning his kingship with that of the ancient pharaohs. Under the Ptolemaic dynasty, Egypt's deities flourished alongside Greek ones. Temples were restored, rituals preserved, and new cults, such as that of Serapis, a fusion of Osiris and Greek Hades, were introduced to bridge the divine worlds. Isis, in particular, rose to global prominence. Her image, once confined to the banks of the Nile, now adorned temples in Rome, Pompeii, and beyond. Sailors, merchants, mothers, and seekers across the Mediterranean world worshipped her as a universal mother, a healer, and a queen of heaven. Her temples functioned not only as places of worship, but as centers of healing, wisdom, and mystery. Initiates learned her sacred rites, and her myths were retold in plays, prayers, and processions from North Africa to Britain. This expansion did not mean that the core Egyptian beliefs were forgotten. In rural villages and temple sanctuaries, the rituals of Ma'at, the myths of Ra's voyage, the stories of Horus and Seth, and the weighing of the heart continued to be practiced with devotion. Priests maintained their hieroglyphic texts, sculptors carved new reliefs in ancient styles, and pilgrims still brought offerings to sacred lakes and groves. Even in the face of Roman rule, Egyptian religion persisted. The Romans themselves were fascinated by the depth and mystery of Egyptian theology. Emperors like Hadrian visited temples, and Egyptian motifs appeared in Roman art, jewelry, and literature. Obelisks were transported to Rome, and the cult of Isis became one of the empire's most enduring faiths. But with the rise of Christianity in the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, the old gods began to fade. The temples, once filled with incense, chants, and sacred music, grew silent. Edicts from Christian emperors closed sanctuaries and outlawed traditional rites. The priesthoods dissolved, and the last hieroglyphic inscriptions, like those at the Temple of Philae, date to the 4th and 5th centuries. And yet, even as the official worship of the Egyptian gods disappeared, their stories did not die. They lived on in art, in folklore, and in the new spiritual systems that emerged in the ancient world. Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and early Christian mysticism were all touched by Egyptian ideas. The wisdom of Thoth, the resurrection of Osiris, the purity of Ma'at, these concepts filtered into new theologies and philosophies. In later centuries, Egypt itself became a symbol, a land of ancient wisdom, eternal mysteries, and hidden knowledge. European travelers, artists, and scholars rediscovered the ruins of Karnak, Luxor, and the Valley of the Kings. The Rosetta Stone, found in 1799, unlocked the secrets of hieroglyphs, and with it, the world of the ancient Egyptians was reborn in modern minds. Today, the gods of Egypt, Ra, Isis, Osiris, Anubis, Thoth, Bastet, and countless others, continue to capture the imagination. Their images adorn museums, their names echo in books, films, and dreams. The myths that once explained the rising sun, the turning of the stars, the journey of the soul, still speak to universal truths about life, death, justice, hope, and the eternal dance between order and chaos. In this way, the mythology of ancient Egypt has never truly vanished. It lives on, not only in texts and temples, but in the human longing to understand the cosmos, to find meaning in suffering, and to believe that even in the darkest night, the sun will rise again.